Everyone was trying to keep me away from the new boy, Nick. He was rumored to have a criminal record and had just been released from a juvenile detention center. But I didn't believe the gossip. It's true that he looked a bit creepy and had his own clothing style, but wearing a black hoodie all the time doesn't mean you're a criminal. I actually felt sorry for him. Everyone was deliberately avoiding him, so I decided to let him be my lab partner in chemistry class. He was friendlier than I thought and seemed harmless, at least with me. In fact, I started to like him. We even started walking to school together. But soon, people started teasing me for hanging out with him. It's really hard for a popular girl like me to hear her friends whispering her name in the hallway. They were saying things about me hanging out with some freak. I didn't want to lose my friends for a man I had just met. I had to put my reputation first. So, I decided to end our friendship. I know it sounds selfish, but it would be better for both of us. At lunch break, I decided to make a scene. I waited for Nick to come and sit at the same table as me. As he was about to sit down, I put my backpack on the seat and told him that he should find another table to sit at, away from me. I tried so hard to not make him feel weird, but Nick walked off, looking so embarrassed, and the whole hall laughed at him. I felt really bad. I told my best friend Claire, and she told me not to worry. Claire and I have been friends for a year, and I trust her more than anyone. Ever since she and her mom moved to the suburbs of the town, she's been coming over to my house almost every day. Me and her have so much fun together, and she even gets on well with my mom and dad, especially my dad. Sometimes I think she gets on better with my dad than me. She always talks about how cool and funny he is. I thought for a while that she had a crush on him, but I was probably making a big deal out of nothing. It's most likely she's just jealous, as she hasn't got a dad of her own. Anyway, back to Nick. The next day, I thought things would get back to normal, but I then noticed Nick kept glaring at me in class. Maybe he was still upset with me, but I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to be seen talking to him. That afternoon, I was going to meet Claire to hang out. I just needed to put some books away first, but when I got to my locker, I saw it was unlocked. I knew I had locked it that morning. Someone must have broken in, but who could it be? I opened it up and looked inside. Everything looked the same as when I had left it. It was weird. What was the point of breaking in if they weren't going to take anything? Are they trying to hassle me? Then I realized what was missing. It was a photograph of me and my dad. I realized it must be Nick. That creep had broken into my locker and stolen a picture of me. When I told Claire, she laughed at me and told me I must have left it unlocked. But I wasn't so sure. I couldn't prove it was Nick, but I had the feeling it was. Over the next few days, other strange things happened. I kept getting calls on my phone from an unknown number, and when I answered, there would just be someone breathing down the phone and they would hang up. Then, I got in trouble at school for not completing my English homework. I knew I had put it in my teacher's tray, so someone must have removed it, so I would get into trouble. But the weirdest thing that happened was that I kept getting junk mail through the post, and loads of emails from companies I had never even heard of. Someone must have been giving my details out just to bug me. It must have been Nick trying to get his revenge on me for embarrassing him, but I couldn't prove it. I told Claire all this, but she said maybe they were all coincidences. Lots of people get junk mail and prank phone calls, right? But then something happened, which proved it wasn't all in my head. One night, I tried to log onto Instagram and saw that my password had been changed. My account had been hacked. I looked at my account. Someone had changed my profile picture to one of a woman with makeup over her face, half-dressed and falling over drunk. Someone had edited the face to look just like me. I was so upset. And there were other photos on my profile too, ones taken with my webcam without my knowledge. I called Claire in tears. I didn't know what to do, so she reported my account so the pictures would be taken down. But before it was removed, I saw all of the horrible comments from people at my school. I was so embarrassed. Now I had to convince everyone it wasn't me. Could you imagine being in such an awkward situation? The next night was the scariest incident by far. I had to stay late after school to finish an art project. By the time I left, it was getting dark. As I walked home, I kept glancing behind me as I thought I heard someone near. Then, I heard footsteps. I quickened my pace until I was almost running. As I turned a corner, I glanced behind me. There was someone wearing a black hoodie, hiding their faces. It was Nick. He had his hands in his pocket and was holding onto something. Was it a knife? I ran straight across the road towards my house. A car was heading right towards me and had to make an emergency stop. I heard its horn go off and someone shouting, but I ignored it. I ran up my driveway. I was so close to home. But then I saw something I couldn't quite believe. Nick was stood in the dark on my doorstep. How had he managed to get ahead of me? I ran into my neighbor's garden and hid behind a bush before he could see me. I crouched in the dark for ages until I saw Nick walking around looking for me. I was so terrified. Was I about to be murdered? Nick looked from side to side, then assuming I wasn't there, walked away. Then I saw my dad's car pull up in the driveway. I was so relieved. Nick was right in front of the car. My dad would see him and I could tell my dad everything. Dad got out of the car and walked over to Nick. Then the most shocking thing happened. Dad smiled at him. The person pulled down their hood, and I saw it wasn't Nick who was chasing me. It was Claire. Why was she wearing a hoodie like Nick? And why was my best friend following me? Was this some kind of sick game? Dad invited her into the house. I stood in the garden for ages, not sure what to do. Claire was the one harassing me all along? Why was she doing this? After a while, I plucked up the courage, ready to head inside. When I got in, Claire was sitting at the table, and Dad was getting ready to serve us dinner. Claire acted like nothing had happened. The hoodie she had been wearing was gone. She must have hidden it outside. I ate the meal and made conversation, but inside I was so upset and scared. As soon as Claire went home, I told Dad everything, but he laughed at me and told me that I must be making it up. He told me that Claire was a sweet girl and would never do anything mean to me, especially trying to scare me. The next day, I was too scared to go to school. I lied to Dad and said that I had a stomachache. I don't think he believed me, but he let me take the day off anyway. By the afternoon, I knew what I had to do. I headed over to Claire's house. I knew that if I looked through her room, I could find the evidence that she was harassing me. I biked over to Claire's house and looked for the spare key. I knew they kept it in one of those fake rocks and soon found it. I let myself into the house and shut the door. It was so easy. I headed to Claire's room. I had been there loads of times, but this time it felt different. Her room looked so normal, and I felt a pang of sadness when I saw a photo of us on her pinboard. Perhaps I was mistaken all along. Claire was my best friend. There was no way she would be so mean to me. I was about to go when I heard a noise outside of someone approaching and the sound of a key in the door. How would I explain what I was doing? I knew I had no time to get out, so I hid under the bed. I couldn't see what was happening, but I could hear someone come into the bedroom and sit down on the bed, but they weren't alone. Claire was telling the other person how she had more photos of me to put online. Then I heard something that scared me more than anything else. The person she was talking to was Nick. They spoke about how much fun they were having messing with me and seeing me upset. They were both trying to ruin my life. I laid under the bed, silently crying. After a few minutes, they said they were going to go and get a coffee, and they headed out. They spoke like they had known each other for years. As soon as I was sure they had gone, I ran out of the house and home to my dad. I told him everything, and this time he believed me and took me straight to the police station. The police went round to Claire's house and started to investigate, and that was when the truth started to come out. It turned out that Claire had always been jealous of me, as she was convinced that my dad was also hers. She never knew her dad, but knew that my dad and her mom had dated years ago, before she was born. She was convinced that if they hadn't split up, then she would have had a better life. She was jealous of my big house and hated that my dad had gotten married to my mom, had me, and forgotten all about her. She wanted to make me suffer because of it. That was why Claire spent so much time hanging out with me. She didn't want to be my friend. She just wanted to see my dad and ruin my life. But that wasn't the most shocking thing. The police officer explained that Claire and Nick weren't strangers. They were twins. Nick had got into trouble when he was younger and had spent time in a juvenile detention center. When Claire and her mom had moved back to town, they had kept Nick a secret, as they were ashamed of him. When he had been released and moved back to town, the school agreed to keep it a secret that he and Claire were related, so it didn't affect Claire at school. When I had upset Nick, he agreed to help Claire make my life a misery. I couldn't believe that Claire had a twin, and that they had both been plotting against me. My dad was so upset that Claire and Nick's jealousy had caused me so much pain. He apologized for not telling me that he had dated Claire's mom, but he said that it had happened so long ago that he thought it was best not to talk about it. And he didn't want to upset my mom by talking about his ex. Claire's mom had moved out of town before Dad had even known she was pregnant, but he took a paternity test to settle this. It turns out he wasn't Claire and Nick's father, which was such a relief. All of the jealousy they had aimed at me, and it was all for no reason. That was a month ago. Since then, Nick has been sent back to a juvenile detention center. Claire got off with a warning from the police, but was expelled from school for breaking into my locker and stealing my homework. Her mom was so embarrassed that she moved away, taking Claire with her. Now, I have a personal attack alarm that I carry everywhere, and when I am out, I am constantly looking over my shoulder, just in case there is someone following me. I still can't believe that my best friend was actually my worst enemy. And the worst thing is, I still miss Claire.
Hi, I'm Miley, and I have always wanted to go abroad. Every year my family stays in our caravan, which is okay, but it gets a bit boring as there's not much to do. I was desperate to travel to another country, where they speak a different language and eat different food. I love learning about new places and geography at school, and imagining what it would be like to see the mountains or the desert. I decided to save up money for a whole year, and for my birthday, I asked if people would give me money to help me fund my trip. Then I booked my flights, and in a month, I was ready to go. It did not go according to my plan. I didn't expect the airport to be so busy or confusing. I spent ages queuing in the wrong line and had to ask for directions to find the security gate. I beeped when I walked through the scanner, so then I had to be poked and prodded until the security guards were happy that I was safe. But I'd forgotten to take some of the things out of my rucksack, so they confiscated my sunscreen, makeup bag, scissors, and sewing kit. I felt so upset that I was delighted to find so many shops on the other side where I could replace my makeup. An hour later, I heard a voice announcing, "Could Miley Lewis please proceed to Gate 7, as she is about to miss her flight?" That was me. In a panic, I sprinted to the gate, losing my scarf on the way, and made it only just in time, exhausted. I was a bit nervous about the flight, but tried to push the horror stories of planes falling out of the sky out of my mind by putting on some music. But the stewardess told me that it had to be turned off for takeoff. I'd shut my book in the overhead locker, so I just had to sit and grip the arms of my chair as we took off, and I felt my ears pop. When we